the 2024 Bike New York 5-borough bike tour. I've told you guys about the 5-borough before, especially the debacle that happened the year before last, I believe it was, when my bike tires deflated overnight and just wouldn't take air the morning of. And we wound up, me and my boy Pablo, that do these tours together, wound up just going to a bagel shop in Brooklyn instead of doing the 5-borough. But for those of you who don't know, it is cycling season for myself. It's usually around the time where I start bike riding and start training up for doing a cycling marathon, a bike marathon. And me and Pablo, shout out to Pablo, Spun Today alum, either together or sometimes separately, we'll train every weekend or every other weekend for a month or so or two prior to one of these marathons to get our miles up, as you do. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the 5-borough is a really cool, probably one of my favorite ones of these cycling marathons. And it's definitely the longest. It's 40 miles and you cycle through, it's definitely the biggest also. It's like 33,000 cyclists, I think, signed up this year. But you cycle through all 5 boroughs of New York City, hence the name 5-borough. You start in Lower Manhattan. And by the way, they close a bunch of streets down, a bunch of bridges and tunnels and highways just for the cyclists. So they close it down from car traffic, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And you get to ride down from Lower Manhattan, past the Freedom Tower, through Radio City. You ride through Central Park, go up to Harlem, cross over to Astoria. You get to ride over the 59th Street Bridge. You go through Brooklyn. You ride through the FDR. You get to ride through the BQE. And ultimately, you cross the Verrazano, which is at the very end, into Staten Island, and then ride back towards the ferry area, which is where you either start or finish. And by that, I mean, everybody starts in Lower Manhattan, but some people, drive in the morning to Lower Manhattan and try to find parking around there, and then do the full bike tour. And then afterwards, after they're done, hop on the ferry back to Lower Manhattan to get their car and then bounce, or a subway or whatever. Alternatively, which is what we do now, and what we have done the last couple times. The first time we did it that way, but now we, in the morning, drive to Staten Island, park there very close to the ferry, hop on the ferry in the morning with our bikes and a shitload of people that are all doing the same thing, and ride it to Lower Manhattan. So we, start the marathon, finish up, and then we end in Staten Island. So then we just go to the car and bounce from there, instead of having to wait for the ferry at the end. We definitely prefer it that way. I recommend that way, because there's going to be a shitload more people at the end trying to get on the ferry to get back to Manhattan. Plus you're tired from just cycling fucking 40 miles, especially over that steep incline of the Verrazano Bridge. But yeah, it was a dope ride. It's really cool to take in the city that way. I've said in the past, just from cycling in general, that you see things and notice stores or houses or areas, you take it in differently than you would walking or driving, which is an aspect of cycling but especially when in an occasion like this, a once in a year occasion where they just lock everything down to car traffic, and you get to ride through a tunnel in the FDR and everybody's, woohooing and screaming and shit on your bikes, and you're just taking over the whole side of the highway, and then the cars on the other side that are going in the opposite direction, they're honking and cheering people on and stuff. It's pretty dope. And I had a personal goal this year, try not getting off my bike at all. And by at all, I mean like to walk a certain distance or up the inclines of the bridges, etc. But everybody, gets off in the rest stops or gets off to stretch on the side and then get back on your bike and keep going. So I had that personal goal, especially after last year's Hudson Valley that I told you guys about, where in the last 5 miles or so, 5 or 6 miles, my quads just locked up and I had to fucking call in reinforcements to pick me up and take me to the finish line, which fucking sucked. And I'm very happy to say that I didn't get off at all and cycled over every bridge and steep incline. Queensboro, at the Verrazano, at the steep ass, long ass BQE stretch, none of it. Cycled throughout it all. And I had a slightly different game plan this time, which worked. And two things that actually helped me. One, in the past, I would, when I get towards the end of the BQE, I would start cycling fast before getting on the Verrazano. Cycling faster, trying to gain momentum to try to ride that momentum up the incline of the Verrazano. and I would burn out. Only the very first time that I did the 5-borough, I was able to get through it without issue. The next time or two after that, I had to walk across the Verrazano with the bike because I was just burnt out. But this time, by not doing that and stopping on the BQE a couple times, you know, go a mile or two, stretch, go an exit or two, stretch, get off the bike, drink some water, then, you know, resume after. Doing that, I was well rested enough, well rested in air quotes, you know, after doing fucking 30 something miles at that point. But I was able to take on the incline without issue. The other thing that helped me a lot was while you're going through, there's some streets where, you know, it's blocked off to cars, the full avenue, but then the cross streets are not. So they stop the cyclists every once in a while to let people walk across the street, or let the cars that are, you know, passing by that street go. And right before the Queensboro, one of the marshals that were there, he kept saying, and I was, oh shit, let me try that. He kept saying, when you're cycling up the Queensboro, just use gear 1 or gear 2. Otherwise, you're burning energy for no reason. And I've always taken the opposite approach. I try to, because if you don't know bikes, the gear 1 is the slowest you'll go, but it's the smallest revolutions in terms of the cycling chain. Gear 8 is the biggest revolution, so it gives you, so one pedal gets you further when you're on gear 8 versus if you're on gear 1, one pedal doesn't do much. But the thing is, you want it on the lower gears when you're going uphill, because you don't want to give yourself even more of resistance when going up. You want the least resistance possible, which would be gear 1. And this marshal was saying, just use gear 1 or gear 2. Don't overdo it. You're just wasting energy for no reason and no additional gains. Just use gear number 1 or gear number 2. And I was, oh shit, I never done that. I always start on 8 to try to get the most out of it. And then I go down to 7, then I go down to 6, then I go down to 5, and I usually teeter off around 5. But I burn out my quads doing that. And that's what I did with the Verrazano. That's what I've always done with the Queensboro. And this time I was, all right, let me try that. Because my goal is, again, to stay on the bike, pedal through. And when I got to the Queensboro, instead of dropping down from 8 to 5, I dropped it down lower. I dropped it down to 4 or 3 and was able to get through it like that. But then I kept that in mind whenever I was going through any more of the inclines. And I dropped it down definitely on the Verrazano to 3, 2, and then to 1 for the duration of it. And that absolutely worked. So highly recommend, if anybody out there is a novice cycler, or even if you've been cycling for a while but just like me had like different approach to it, try that. Definitely worked for me, might work for you. But yeah, it was a dope ride. Looking forward to a few more this year. I'm going to do the Hudson Valley again, as well as the Twin Lights ride, and I'll definitely let you guys know about those once they happen. And as Lil Wayne would say, I'm proud of me. Shout out to Bike New York and the folks that put together the 5-borough and all of these tours.